Welcome, everybody. I'm still getting used to doing these lives on YouTube, so welcome. Today, we are going to be talking about the energy update, what's going on right now, energy-wise. And then we're going to do something a little bit different, something that I have been doing a lot of research into and doing a lot of parallel learning, which I'll explain to you when I get to it, but talking about spiritual history, especially the ancient Egyptians today. So first of all, OMG, can we just say wow on the energy release on October 10th? It's like, we're all being faced with this. Are we ready to step into this next phase and let go of some old past life, past experience, emotion? Right? So the numerology, if you look at it, this whole year has been about community, right? So it's really interesting. This whole year has brought us through what is community? Who do we want in our community? There are all kinds of teachings around what community is all about, right? And it's been interesting in my field, and I always have this like question: is it because I have this awareness of like six being more about the community and seeing people for their strengths and knowing where people belong, and that's the teaching of the six, right? Is being able to see people for their strengths and knowing where they belong and communing, right? And having everybody work in their strengths in that community. And so people who have the sixth vibration are very good at this. So I'm always like, did I have experiences of community and teaching in community because I have that awareness of the 2022, and also the 222 is all about mirroring and relationships and communing deeper and all of that stuff. So it's like the oneness that comes in relationships. So getting a six out of the 222, it's like, if people haven't communed with you properly, you're probably gone in your separate directions, because there's no way to bring things together that just don't belong in a two energy. So that's been really interesting. The other thing that I think is really cool is so this whole year, as we go from the very first month, January, to September, and that completes the cycle. So the main teachings of this year's sixth cycle has completed in September. Now we're opening up to, it's almost like a transition. We're going from, so October, November, December, now we're kind of wrapping up all that old stuff, not old stuff, but those teachings we've been getting all year. So we're wrapping them up in a nice bow, starting to understand them a little bit better. We might get, a few little incidences like, did you learn the lesson? Did you get it? Are you ready to walk into this new cycle we're going into? And so and I think it's super interesting that like this year was the first year where I was like, oh my goodness, Thanksgiving. Yeah, Thanksgiving is really giving thanks of all the lessons of the year and really coming together and bringing all of the fruits that you've gained and what you've acknowledged and learned and grown from, and this new being, because we're always raising higher, we're always gaining more light, we're always becoming more aware, always, whether we feel like it or not. That's always happening. So it's like, oh, then Thanksgiving hits in October for us in Canada anyways, and it's like, oh, thanks for all those teachings, thanks for everything this year. And then, the 10th hit. And I think this is so interesting. So it's almost like we have a repeat of the first three numbers of teachings that we got at the beginning, except they are more on a soul level. Okay, so the 10th month And the first day, actually, it is an initiation. It's like the beginning of opening that soul cycle that's actually now fully open, the portal to, I can't say it's a portal, but it's an energy download about, the zero, the 10 amplifies the one. So it's like, what are you putting out in the world? What are you amplifying? And this is really a reflection of where you've come and where you are going. So, are you clearing? Did you use the last year to learn and clear, learn and clear, learn and clear, learn and clear, and honor your peace of mind? Or has it been a very busy cycle, a very busy connection, maybe some stickiness along the way, not quite sure how it's supposed to work out, and all of this, like, where did this cycle leave you? And this is what is being amplified right now, is the emotions of where that cycle left you. So it's really interesting. And some of the things that have been coming to physical reality in my world has been like, putting things in like, oh, did you learn the lesson this year? Did you see clearly the lessons for you? Right. And so there's been these really interesting and lovely interactions that are really starting to help me understand, like, okay, yeah, I did get it. I do understand. And also, I highly recommend following A Course in Miracles book club, because I am telling you, there is all kinds of information in that book. And as we talk about it, I mean, it's visceral. You can feel the energy. And it is such an uplifting feeling. And so, are you ready? Are you ready to step into these much higher vibrations of thinking on all levels? Right. So, and I go like this, but I should be going like this, because we are literally raising our vibrations higher and higher. And that's the ascension process. That's what we are actually working towards, is the ascension process. Okay, so the next thing I wanted to talk about was the ancient cultures, ancient spirituality, or spiritual history. And we're starting with ancient cultures. So I have been doing a lot of research, a lot of research. I have been doing a lot of reading in Dolores Cannon. I've been doing a lot of reading on Atlantis. Lemuria is my next focus, but right now I'm really focused on Atlantis. I'm really focused on um, well, that the Egyptian culture has always fascinated me, but I have gone through this realization about Egyptian culture that has really helped me to understand a depth of, what took place, the magical rituals, and how those have programmed the mind, and how that programming has actually carried through the ages. And it's just been, so amazing putting all of these pieces together. And I like to call it parallel learning, because it's so incredible. Like, I've been fascinated with Dolores Cannon's work for years now. I listen to her quite frequently, and it's so funny how, as I'm learning all of this stuff, the book that I chose to read really was explaining kind of what I was learning on a different level. So, what I came across was in Dolores Cannon's work, she she did a hypnosis therapy session, several of them, with one particular person who um, had memories that lived in Atlantis. So, in his hypnotherapy, he talks a lot about the practices, what went wrong, what they were doing there, and all of that. So, what I understood from that book was that the Atlanteans, there was a huge project, so many different beings coming together from all around the universe, putting all of their genetic each one of their genetic programs into the genes of what we now are as human beings. Okay, so they were there to foster the human being, help them grow and mature to the point that the spirit can connect into the human. Now, I thought this was fascinating. I was like, oh, I never really thought about it in those terms before, of course. I mean, you can't have awareness if you don't have awareness. So, this was very interesting to me. So, what my interpretation of that, and some of the other history and stuff that I've studied around what took place in Atlantis, was there were 9 energy centers that needed to be filled into that particular experience. So those were the beginnings of the 9 energy centers that needed to be filled here on the planet to complete the energy section. Then 2 more came later on. So we have 11 genes, 11, we have actually uh, 12. No, we have 24, but we have, oh goodness gracious. Eh, okay, the genes maybe don't exactly matter, but I know we have either, it's 9 started, 2 more came in later, and we have 11, which makes 22. So even when you look at numerology speaking, 11 and 22 are master numbers. And all of these things are very important. Numbers are extremely important to how the matrix is actually being manifested. But that's a completely different topic. The interesting thing is all of these different genetics that actually live inside of us, and that's why we have so many different types of thoughts, ideas. We have, what somebody else's interests are different than mine, their gifts are different than mine, their imprint is different than mine, because those genetics can organize themselves in very separate and different ways. And so, anyways, so I find that very fascinating. Now, we were programmed with the genetics of light beings and dark beings, and this was very important to bring those light and dark beings into one being to learn. It was to help God consciousness, or whatever, to be able to see how that would manifest into the world. And they say, I don't know if this is true, but they say that we are actually one of the most volatile realities to step into, and that there are many light beings who are coming right now, because all of these energies, all of these beings that help to create us, they care very deeply about how we evolve and how we move forward. So it was very important for a lot of light beings to incarnate into the human being to help bring forth this evolution of light into the world, because it's been very, very dark. Okay, so so they say that as uh, the Atlantis, as it fell, the survivors of Atlantis then moved to Egypt. This was something that I learned in Dolores Cannon's work, Keepers of the Garden. They then went on to continue fostering and caring for the humans, but in a very separated way. So, what that meant was there were pharaohs or kings and queens who communicated with the gods and then told the people what the gods wanted from them. And this is very interesting, because as the kings and queens changed and as the pharaohs changed, the gods actually changed as well. So what that did was that it created different programming. So what happens to the subconscious mind when you are honoring a god is the you are learning through the matrix what that god specializes in. Okay, so each god that they prayed to specialized in many different things. There was mathematics, language, there was agriculture, there was construction, medicine. So they all had their specialty. And as the people would pray to these gods and do sacrifices in honor of these gods, there that knowledge would come through. Okay, so we find out later that Jesus and his sacrifice actually opened, because every sacrifice actually opens a portal of energy that's allowed to come through that can give us different insights and different light. It's to help bring in light. That's why sacrifice was so important in ancient cultures, because that's what they were trying to do, was bring in light. So when Jesus gave his light, his when Jesus was crucified on the cross, that was the ultimate sacrifice. That was the ultimate light, that we can always find the light through him. And that's what that sacrifice was all about. Well, I mean, it was about way more than that, but that was one of the things, is the ultimate sacrifice of Jesus. Okay, so ancient Egypt, the going back to that, so there were many sacrifices. There were many people who would choose to sacrifice themselves in these cultures, and they would go to the high priest, and the high priest would perform, or the pharaohs, if you want to call them, or high priests, whatever. Would perform these rituals. So in the beginning, when the early years of ancient Egypt, there were kings and queens, and they say that the kings and queens were half human, half other beings. They looked different. They a lot of times would not come outside. They would stay in the temples most of the time. There's many different depictions of this. They say that they were giants, or that they had elongated heads, that they just looked different than the other humans, and those became the kings and queens. Um, I can't say that I know for sure exactly what those people looked like, but they would mate with the humans. And then as the humans' blood started to become thicker and thicker, and the gods separated themselves, and then the humans were taking over more and more. So then it became that the kings and queens would communicate with the gods, and the kings and queens would communicate with the pharaohs, and the pharaohs would communicate with the humans. And then soon, I think the pharaohs became the communications to the gods, and the kings and queens were a different sector of that. That's just my understanding as I'm doing the reading. So, in these sacrifices, it's a very interesting knowledge here. Now, this is from a personal past life experience that I had. Now, my ideas of past life is a very different now. It's not that we lived at another time. It's actually that these experiences are happening in the now, because they are programs. So, in Where'd You Focus, first season, we do a series of life and death cycles. So, reincarnation, what happens when you die, planning your next life, and all of that. I highly recommend that you go and watch that series. It is a very great and thorough. I think there's 3 or 4 parts to it that really explain in deep detail. But what I'm going to take from that is that as we're planning our life in the spirit world, we are actually able to insert into the soul different experiences that and energies that we want the human mind to have, or to, I mean, we're all energy makeup, right? And we're very individually energetically made up. So those experiences that sit in your subconscious mind, those programs are running, whether you're aware of them or not. And so I thought it was very interesting that during the planning process that they can actually insert anybody's experience that is emotionally charged with a story, right? And they can put that into the soul line. The soul line, what I have come to understand, which you can also learn about that in Where's Your Focus, is the soul line is closely connected to the ley lines of the planet, and they are a collection of um, memories and energy of the progression of evolution of the planet here on Earth. And so, what that does is it creates different energies for the person that has these programs in their subconscious mind. And so, the subconscious mind is made up of all of these energies. And so, when you're tapping into these spots in your mind, they're just emotionally charged stories that are giving emotions to your now to help you to create external experiences to come in so that you can do learning. Okay, so all of these experiences are actually to help you to raise your vibration and move in a higher um, movement towards atonement of God into higher layers. I'm also using some recent knowledge that I'm learning in A Course in Miracles as I'm talking about this because that course too is actually very powerful. Okay, so um, in that session where I could see a little deeper into the story of what took place, is that there was some ancient magic cast, not only by me, but by many individuals, um, where, humans would sacrifice a family member. And the family member, this was something that they wanted. They wanted to experience these things. At least that was my perspective, is they wanted to experience these things. It was an honor to have a family member sacrifice because as anybody that passes away in your life that is very close to you in the family, the veil actually thins quite a bit, and you are actually able to gain insight, knowledge, energy, and it has the potential to really raise your vibration. And so that's why we should celebrate when somebody is passing away in our life. But in this particular type of circumstance, it was celebrated, but it came with a lot, a lot of heavy sadness. Okay, so that heavy sadness is a reflection of that loss and that connection. So, through sadness, through hardship, we are able to grow and move forward in a huge and quick way. Okay, so where was I going with it next? I was um, so as the high priest that was doing these sacrifices, I did have a lot of connection to the higher frequencies that were available. So a lot of information was downloaded through my energy at that time, through that soul experience that I had. So a lot of energy was downloaded, but I was also connected and deeply indebted to the karma of many, many families and the sadness that they experienced. And what this was doing actually was a sadness in my soul. It was a sadness that I carried with me. I definitely felt connected to all of those people and their mourning processes that they went through in losing somebody very special to them. So was able to heal those connections. And I definitely feel a huge shift in sadness inside of my heart by going through that. But that magic that's been cast has carried with us all these generations keep. And it's very interesting because my soul line carries the energy of being sacrificed over and over and over again as a witch, as a truth teller, as even in modern days of like, um, destroying and having these destructions of my career, destructions of my reputation, just, building up and destructing and building up and destructing over and over and over again. And it's this sadness that, keeps firing. It's like every time there's this destruction, it's this deep sadness all over again. So very interesting to be able to take that cloak off and move forward without that truth in my heart, and realizing that um, that karma is done. We don't have to live in fear anymore. We don't have to live with that sadness anymore. It's done. It's over. But that programming, it sits in the subconscious mind. It carries with us. It defines our reality. It defines life. It defines our relationships, and so many different areas are defined by these particular experiences that, as we move through them and shed these deep emotions, we're actually shedding these deeper parts of karma within ourselves. So I thought that was really interesting about ancient Egypt. And so also what came with that teaching is, as we pull away from connecting to those other gods that have beautiful teachings, it's not that we don't want the teachings of those particular gods. It's that if we connect to God, if we bring our connection upwards to God instead of outwards to gods through the matrix, when we connect to God, we are actually able to step into the shoots of the God that we are wanting the information from. And as we step into those shoes, that we are able to actually viscerally download that information much more readily than by doing different rituals and sacrifices and all of that thing, those things in the matrix, which is actually being confirmed by the information that I'm reading in the Course in Miracles, is that, you know, miracles are spontaneous adjustments to the matrix that happens within us and all around us. And it's not something that we have to try and make happen. It just naturally happens. And when we work in a community, when we work together, and join in that God higher frequency together, we are actually able to not pull, but step into the information that we need more readily, and experience it from a first person experience instead of an intuitive type of experience, which actually has been a huge awareness for me recently. Um, that, when we step into these experiences, we step into these shoes, it's just such a different experience of downloading information, that when we're heavy with fear, when we're heavy with um, sadness, we're blocked from these experiences. We're blocked from raising in higher and higher and higher vibrations of reality. We are blocked from, shedding an identity that, is defined by the outside world. Our identity in so many ways, and this goes back to ancient Egypt, is identified so much by the outside world. that we have for not, I don't know if we ever knew it. I don't know if we ever had this inspiration that moving our energy upwards, communing, atoning to the truth of God and atoning and releasing those fears, releasing these very dogmatic ideas that we think keep us safe but are not real. God is constantly putting things in our path. God is constantly giving us opportunities to step into the miracles that are available to us, yet we don't see because we have so many dogmatic ideas that come from the outside world that tell us how things should be. And when we atone to that higher frequency of God, we're able to shed all of that identity. Fear is not real. Fear is, even if we have a deep fear of death, okay, so I think death is one of the number one fears that we have as humans. And why wouldn't we? I mean, we've watched and mourned our loved ones through sacrifice, through illness, through accidents, spontaneously looking and seeing and watching somebody die, or somebody that you love that's been here and then they're gone. These senses of these emotions, this is like a PTSD, right? PTSD is a whole chemical response to the mind. So of course we would have these deep fears around death. But when you look at death as just an opportunity to see more, an opportunity to step into wider range of knowledge, an opportunity to, you know, understand deeper what it means to commune to higher levels of what that God energy truly is, or God creator, prime creator, what that truly means. Um, it's actually a celebration. It's actually a moving forward with this uh, happiness that that loved one now is in a space that is completely released from the confines of emotion and thought. You know, I mean, as becoming more and more aware of this confinement of emotion and thought is so interesting. It's like once we take off those cloaks, when I do a meditation that you take off those cloaks, you take off that, and you find yourself, floating in space and really communing with the space and letting go of all the ideas and all the heaviness that physical reality brings with it. And then there's just lightness. There's nothing to be scared of. There's nothing to carry. There's nothing to worry about. It's just light, 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 and light. And that's all we've been trying to do in the history of our people, is bring more light. The other thing that we tried to do actually was to appease the god Ma'at. That's the Egyptian god that controls, that builds and destructs. So a lot of these rituals were actually formed to appease the gods who would help in the buildup of beautiful things and not have to struggle through the destruction. And so that's what a lot of the sacrifices were done for, is to appease the gods so that they would help the Ma'at. And this is the buildup and destruction of things. But isn't life and death a buildup and destruction? Isn't it like the very thing, like, somebody lives a life, they learn, they grow, they build themselves up, and then it's a destruction of the whole thing. And you can only hope that you leave behind somewhat of a legacy to carry on what that buildup did, right? So, and that ma'at, um, that the Egyptians would pray to and try to appease the gods so that the gods would take care of the ma'at. Um, it's so interesting how that is also just wanting higher frequencies of light, wanting higher frequencies of understanding, but not wanting to suffer to get it. And suffering does so take on a different light when you look at it through the lens of, you know, what we see in our reality in suffering terms is not the reality. You know, when somebody crosses over to death, that should be celebrated. I will tell you something that I did experience when I was doing some deep cleansing. I did 3 months of deep cleansing last year in 2021 that I thought was really interesting. So I had done a lot of studying the summer before around different types of beings. There's actually a really awesome manual. I call it a manual on all, not all. I mean, I'm sure there's hundreds and thousands of different beings in this universe that we could never even fathom exist. But I think there's 110 different beings in this one manual, and they talk about lifespans of each race. They talk about what that race specializes in. So there's all different kinds. There's like races that specialize in soul development, races that specialize in study of water, races that specialize in the study of gene development. There's just so many different um, um, races that develop and work in the sciences of different aspects of life. And so I'm not sure if it was inspired by that kind of studying that I was doing, but there was went on for about 2 or 3 weeks where I would wake up from a dead sleep, jumping out of my bed like my house was on fire and there was this billowing smoke coming up. And I started to wonder, like, what is going on here? You know what I mean? Like, what's happening? Um, and even my boyfriend was like, I don't get what's happening. Like, why are you having these feelings? And anyways, and there would never be anything happening because my house is never burning down. And one particular night, I woke up with that fright, that feeling, and I thought, what is this? I'm always trying to look deeper into my emotions. What is this? And as I asked that question, I saw just outside my room this black blob kind of moving across the wall. And I thought, what is that? And as soon as I kind of felt into what that was, I was kind of teleported through this this experience to teleported through this to this experience where I was suspended over top of watching this being getting blown up, right? And instantly I knew that that being lived to about 15,000 years old. Okay. And I was very upset. I was very, my relationship with the creator is very deep, very connected. There was, the creator would always give me premonitions about what was happening in the future. And so I said, how could we not know that this was going to happen? And instantly, this feeling came over me of, but you were needed. You were needed somewhere else. So if you would have known it was going to happen, you would have prevented it, and then you wouldn't be where you need to be. And this deep sense of communion with God energy and the love inside of myself started to really deepen in a big, huge way. And that conversation went on. And there was a lot of deep understanding about my connection to God energy, the reasons why human beings are very important, and why we are here on the planet Earth and what we're here to do and what we're here to accomplish. And bringing those genes together is a huge part of that. And getting in the Keepers of the Garden, getting that confirmation through somebody else's past life regression was beautiful. I was like, wow, that's awesome. So um, that was a very interesting experience as to why uh, we can't know. We can't always know what's coming ahead, because if we know, we prevent the lesson. And in our experience, because we only live to, we're only living 100 years, we don't get the depth of understanding that many of these other cultures get. We don't get it. We are, forced into complete darkness to restart all over again every 80 to 100 years for most of us, and some of us even shorter time frames than that. And so, you know, it takes a lot of effort to carry forward these awarenesses and these understandings. And as the spirit is planning the life, it can't know if the mind and the heart and the energy are going to align and use its free will to invite God into the experience. It can't know. It's trying. And I believe what I see is when we're planning these lives is, we're putting in all of these experiences, and then we have all of these variables that could potentially happen. We could potentially see this, we could potentially experience that, but none of it can be known for sure. And I do believe that there are certain experiences that are for sure going to happen. Like, certain soul contracts that need to be fulfilled, certain relationships that are going to happen, certain big events that need to happen for learning and pushing you in the direction of higher frequency thinking, higher frequency connection, and moving that experience upwards. So, yeah, anyways, that is my spiritual history. Um, the ancient Egyptian culture has been a huge, oh, 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 I really wanted to share this part of it too. I wish I would have shared it a little earlier. The very interesting part that I discovered through watching all of these ancient Egyptian, ancient Egyptian videos and movies, and I've read a couple books now on ancient Egypt. And one of the things that I thought really fascinating is this fascination with ancient Egypt to make the soul live forever. And they would do these rituals and use aromatherapy and do all of these different things to foster that relationship of creating an experience of the soul living forever. And as I was listening to the Keepers of the Garden, one of the things that they talk about, one of the things that he talked about in that book was that they had to stay present and closely watch over the humans until the soul could be implanted. Once the soul was implanted, then the spirit can connect to the human. And I thought that's very interesting. And here we are, and we find this text in ancient Egypt, that the reason why they did embalming, the reason why they did many of the rituals, was to create an experience where the soul would live forever. And the soul does live forever. Those are the ley lines of the planet. They are very closely connected to the ley lines of the planet. So as we clear the soul, we're actually helping to clear and evolve the planet to higher frequencies as well. So, very interesting information that I am so pleased to kind of put all of that stuff together. Now, my next one is the Sumerians. Sumerians. That's another ancient culture that I'm very interested in because the magic is different. So the magic in ancient Egypt, excuse me, the symbols, they're a little bit different, but very similar. So the symbols that they used in ancient Egypt, we can see the eye. The eye was very important, right? And the eye represents the all-seeing eye, the being able to see premonitions, seeing through, and there's so many different um, meanings to that eye. And if we could look through, I think it is the Illuminati, they use the eye. You find the eye on our dollar bill. So that eye, that magic has carried forward centuries and centuries through all of the years. This knowledge is available to us. It's being carried through by different symbols that speak to your subconscious mind, right? So these symbols are being used to help initiate different emotions, different feelings, memories, dreams. Um, sometimes we're coined mentally ill because we see and feel these things that are, not maybe in physical reality. So, and not saying that mental illness is not a real thing. It absolutely is a real thing. I just feel like it's being misused in our culture. Um, so, very interesting. Um, yes, so that's going to be my next mission, is to understand more about the Sumerians. And the Sumerians, they work from the tree of life. And they use the star. The Chinese also use the star as, they learned about the meridians in the body. And then we also have the Australians. The Australians, as far as I have looked into, and which isn't very deep yet, I do not find any magic in the ancient culture of Australia. But what I do see is that their culture, their civilization has never fallen, which I think is very interesting, that Australian civilization had never fallen. And they have dates back to 80,000 years record that there were humans living in Australia at 80,000 years ago now. I'm sure that, and I've watched other shows that talk about, different evidence that there is cultures that lived way beyond um, even 5,500 BC, like 80,000 years ago. It's a long time ago. So they are saying, from what I can see, that Australia has the longest civilization that has ever lived on the planet. And this kind of makes you wonder, right? Are we just like a bunch of petri dishes? Are we like, okay, so we have the Egyptians, let's do this type of magic and program the subconscious in this way and see how that manifests itself. And then we'll program the Samaritans, we'll teach them this type of magic and see how that manifests itself. And then we go to the Chinese and we teach them this type of magic and see how that goes. And then we won't teach the Australians any magic and see what happens there. You can't help but wonder if we're not just this experiment. Well, we are an experiment that is soon moving into an awareness that our being actually has a purpose to this universe, to bring many cultures together in harmony with itself. And that's what this experiment is all about, is to bring that harmony, to bring that all of those energies together so that they can live together in harmony, and see how to do that through our evolution, through our how it's kind of come together. The other thing that I learned too, which I thought was really interesting, is the higher frequencies of light doesn't is not always aware, and I say that, but there is always a small tiny bit of light, even in the darkest and darkest, darkest, darkest bit of being. Because anything that is in physical reality of the matrix is connected to the light. So anything that is in the darkest of darks is still connected to the light in some way. But my interest, the part that I was talking about is I was made aware that sometimes the highest frequency of the light is not always aware of what the darkest, smaller bits of the light is intending and doing. So I thought that was really interesting. And who knows the validity of that? I've never come across any reading or writing that confirms that. So that is my spiritual history. So I will do another one of these lives in another month's time. Uh, this is just for me to be able to keep track of what I'm learning and how I'm starting to process different aspects of myself and its connection to these ancient cultures. It all started because I knew that I was connected deeply to Egypt, and I was getting visions of different Egyptian times. And so it was important for me to learn more about the culture of Egypt and also how to reverse magical spells. And that has been a huge awareness to me. I'm still processing and learning the reversal of different spells that were cast in ancient Egypt, and how those spells have actually carried on throughout history and has created some of the interactions that I'm experiencing with certain people. So it's very interesting, and it's allowing a deeper awareness within myself. And ultimately, I think that is how you break curse, is to become aware that it's there, um, and to release some of the emotional binds that those curses. And I can't say it's a curse; it's a spell, right? So the spell creates a physical experience, and that's why words are spelling. So it creates physical experience in the world. So we then, when it becomes a subconscious experience, then we're picking up those particular spells through over and over and over again. So they're in words, they're in visions, they're in connections, in our relationships, and in relationship to ourselves. These are spells. These are different aspects of our subconscious mind that are connected. So awareness, connecting to those parts of yourself, and reprogramming is how we break the spell. I hope. I think that's what it is. Now, I am still learning about magic and about um, how to undo the different things that have been created along our history. So, thank you for tuning in. I hope that you've enjoyed this live. I do highly recommend, if you are interested in learning more about A Course in Miracles, you can find that on this page. Please subscribe if you are interested in this material, or if this information interests you in any way. I am super happy to be putting these things together for myself and hopefully for many others along the way. And I thank you, and mwah, have a great day. Every Friday.